Hello, and welcome back to Book Reviews. Good news! For the first time in several weeks, I actually managed to finish a book. I was on vacation with some friends last week, and one of the books I bought while there, I managed to read in the downtime, because I wanted to relax rather than get more involved in the massive tome I'm otherwise reading. And what is this book? None other than The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Camus? I don't know how to pronounce it. He's French. It actually fits quite well with the background here. But this is a 138-page essay on suicide. Well, sorta. This is a philosophical text about the notion of the absurd and the philosophy absurdism, discussing how, despite the schism between man and the world and how nothing can ever truly be known, thus disrupting our quest for unity, we can still derive consequences, and from that, create a life around it. It discusses many different applications of such a philosophy and several different consequences to be derived from it, as well as presenting its own absurdist ethical framework. And, as some of you may know, this is the exact work where the now famous line comes from. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. This line is stated right at the end, after a huge culmination of building up the ideals of absurdism and how to remain happy in our ignorance of the world, showing and displaying Sisyphus as a man who was truly happy, liberated rather than trapped by his position. Well, I say right at the end. It's the final line of the essay on page 123, but it then contains a 15-page appendix about Franz Kafka. But I digress. The book is filled with talk of absurdism, with a lot of information on each page and very little filler content. It is a pure and simple exploration of thought and humanity and our relation to the world, and the very absurd itself and how it forms. And this author, Albert Camus, yes, I looked up how to pronounce it, won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1957. And let me tell you, I can see why. The writing is lyrical and poetical, and yet still conveys incredibly complex topics and ideas through a beautiful use of analogies and symbolisms unmatched in most works of writing. And yet, that very poetry is also one of the book's weak points. Although this is turned down in the latter parts, it often feels, especially in the beginning, that explanation and exploration are subjugated to the illustrious writing, and that function is sacrificed for form. It is certainly not impossible to understand, and who knows, maybe I'm just dumb. But it is definitely more difficult to grasp what is being said in the beginning due to an overuse of analogies. I said that there was very little filler, but not none. And this is what little bit there is. What the absurd is not explained in a highly satisfactory way at the outset. And we must read through talk of it in order to finally reach an explanation, and yet even then, it is still much symbolism. Which, let's be honest, is not an inherently negative aspect of writing, but I feel like for this book specifically, it serves a detriment. And this coincides with a very unique style of writing. Much like the last review of the book by Young, I can't say whether or not the singularness of Camus' writing comes from the time within which it was written, the translation, or the author himself, though, truthfully, I lean towards the lattermost. Whatever the case, the prose is very interesting and definitely something that has impacted my own writing, actually, back when I read another book of his, The Plague. I'll review that one day, but today's not that day. To show you what I have said so far, there are 2 paragraphs I would like to read to you. It is a bit unfair for the whole understanding department of things, but this is an excerpt from the end of one of the chapters on page 65, but I think you'll still be able to see. Prayer, says Elaine, is when night descends over thought. But the mind must meet the night, reply the mystics and the existentials. Yes, indeed, but not that night that is born under closed eyelids and through the mere will of man. Dark, impenetrable night that the mind calls up in order to plunge into it. If it must encounter a night, let it be rather that of despair, which remains lucid. Polar night, vigil of the mind, whence will arise, perhaps, the white and virginal brightness which outlines every object in the light of the intelligence. At that degree, equivalence encounters passionate understanding. Then it is no longer even a question of judging the existential leap. It resumes its place amid the age-old fresco of human attitudes. For the spectator, if he is conscious, that leap is still absurd. Insofar as it thinks it solves the paradox, it reinstates it intact. On this score, it is stirring. On the score, everything resumes its place, and the absurd world is reborn in all its splendor and diversity. But it is bad to stop, hard to be satisfied with a single way of seeing, to go without contradiction, perhaps the most subtle of all spiritual forces. The preceding merely defines a way of thinking. But the point is to live. And honestly, this book is filled with hard-hitting and thought-provoking lines, just like the ending of that. And I wish I could tell you all of them, but really, you should just read the book. Overall, I would give this book a 7.2 out of 10. But for anyone interested in philosophy, it is a must-read, alongside the likes of Thus Spoke Zarathustra and Meditations, both of which will be covered at a later date. For me, I can't wait to read more about this author, and I really extend my thanks to my friend who made me get a book by him in the first place, and pushed me to read this one as soon as I got it. But next week, I'll be back again, and I can't say for certain, but I think it will be another book on philosophy. So let's see if it can compare. So make sure to like and subscribe, maybe even ring the bell so you'll know when the next video comes out. But until then, keep on reading.